This is my new SMOK RPM40 pod mod, the real pod mod. It's actually a really nice little unit. It goes up to 40 watts. It's got a 1500 milliamp hour battery, nice display, adjustable power, and one of the coolest things about it is this. This is a rebuildable coil for a pod, which is pretty unusual. I think this is actually the first one. So it's quite small, so it's going to be a little trickier than with a big unit. But anyway, so let's take a quick glance inside. Now, as you might notice, they decided to ship this to me without any cotton in there. It should be obviously fully kitted out from the factory. Another thing I don't like about the original coil is it's extremely close to the edge, and you can see it's very, very close to the edge. So I'm worried about it shorting out on here as well. But anyway, the base unit is very nice, and it comes with a nice little kit of replacement parts. You've got an extra screw in there, you've got a small screwdriver, and O-rings as well. Now, the first thing I'm going to do before I go any further is just measure the original. I'm using the calipers just so that you can actually see it, which is easier for you to see than using a ruler. So if I just put this in and carefully close this, let's get it up to the top there. It's about 5 millimeters. Yeah, 5 millimeters. So about a fifth of an inch. And diameter, outer diameter is about 3.2. The wire that they're using, I'll explain why I want to know this in a moment, is 0.4 millimeters. And the other thing I want to know is what the interior diameter is. I can actually work that out from the information I've already got. And I got a couple of drills here, and this one fits in perfectly. This is a 2.5 millimeter drill, and this is the guy I'm going to be using to actually wrap the wire around. Now the next stage is, this is a 0.6 ohm sub-ohm coil that it comes with from the factory. Now, that's not what I want. One of the reasons I got this was I can make the calls any way I want. I'm a mouth-to-lung vapor, and I'm not into huge clouds or anything like that. So I want something more suitable for mouth-to-lung. So I'm looking at about 1.2 ohms, somewhere around there. Something that won't burn my lungs out from too much nicotine or whatever. So I'm going to go take a look at the computer and work out exactly what sort of length and thickness of wire that I'm going to need to rebuild this. Wire has a couple of different characteristics that we have to understand. One is obviously the thickness of the wire. That can be expressed either in fractions of a millimeter. For vaping, it's going to be fractions of a millimeter. You're not really likely to get up over a millimeter. So in Europe, it'll usually be sold by a fraction of a millimeter, 0.2 up to 0.5, whatever. Or you can have it labeled in AWG, which is American wire gauge, or just gauge, and then a number. Now, interestingly, the higher the number, the thinner the wire. Okay, so AWG 32 is much thinner than AWG 24. You can see the difference here, 0.2 of a millimeter versus 0.5 of a millimeter. Now, the reason why this is important is that the resistance depends on the thickness of the wire. The thinner the wire, the higher resistance. It's kind of like trying to force water through a pipe. The thinner the wire, the thinner the pipe, the higher the resistance. Now, we're looking at a fairly small coil. It's 5 millimeters in length, and basically the center diameter is 2.5 millimeters. So we're looking at a fairly short piece of wire, and we want a reasonably high resistance, 1.3 ohms. We're not going sub-ohm on this particular build. So my guess is it's going to be somewhere up around AWG 32, AWG 30. I don't think it's going to be 28. So I'm guessing, but we'll check anyway. So I'm guessing it's going to be one of these three types of wire. And now I'm going to show you how you actually work out the exact length so you can work out the resistance. Now, before we can decide which kind of wire we're going to get, we need to work out the actual length of wire in the coil so that we can work out what the resistance would be depending on which type of wire we're choosing. In order to do that, you just use good old pi. You take the diameter of the form that you're going to be winding the coil around. So I'm going to be using a 2.5 millimeter diameter coil. Now with that, I need to multiply that. That's the diameter, so I want to multiply 2.5 millimeters by pi, and we get 7.86, say 7.9 millimeters. That's for one turn. Now, as well as going round the form, as we're winding the coil, we're also going along the form. So we have to add in, we have to take the number of turns times 7.9, and for 4 turns that's 3.2 centimeters. Then we add 5 millimeters, which is the width of the coil, and that's how far down the form you're going. You have to include that as well. And then the lead wire. The lead wire is the little bit of wire that sticks out of the coil and goes underneath the screws to attach it. So you need to include that as well, because the space between the coil and the screw is also basically part of the heater element. And we wind up with 4.3 and 5.1 centimeters for 4 and 5 turns. So if we then take a look at the different sizes of wire that we're looking at, I've actually got a bit of a wider range in here just so that you can see how much the resistance varies. 32 gauge AWG 32, that works out at 1.8 ohms for 4-turn coil, or 2.2 ohms for 5 turns. Now that's way too high, so keep going down. 1.4, 1.7, not too high. We need a thicker wire again. AWG 30, 1.1 and 1.4 ohms. That's exactly pretty much what we're looking for. If we go to, again, thicker wire, you're going down to 0.76, 0.9 ohms. So that's much lower resistance than we're looking for. So we know that we want to use AWG 30, and we want to use 5 turns, which was the same as in the stock coil. We're going to make a coil for this, so first of all we have to look at what type of wire we're going to go for. Now if you go to any of the vape shops online, you'll see they have a huge amount of different types of wire, all different configurations and materials. Now as far as material goes, you've got 4 choices. You've got nichrome, Kanthal, stainless steel, and titanium. Now given the restrictions of the size and everything else and the type of vape this is, I would consider only nichrome and Kanthal as really being suitable. Now nichrome is nickel chrome alloy. It's about 80 to 90% nickel and the rest is chrome. That's fine, works very well. However, quite a few people have issues with nickel allergies, and that kind of puts me off that since the alternative, which is Kanthal, is non-allergenic. It doesn't contain any nickel, and they're the same price and pretty much the same performance. If anything, Kanthal's a little bit better, can withstand higher temperatures than nichrome. I'd go for Kanthal. That's what I'd recommend. That's what I'm using. Okay. Now that we've taken a look at that, you've got 2 choices with with Kanthal wire. You've either got your standard round wire or you've got flat wire. Round wire is slightly easier to work with. It's slightly easier to get the cotton through. The advantage of the flat wire, which is what I'm going to be using, is that it's got about 50% more surface area in contact with the wick, and therefore with the vape juice, which means you get more vapor for the same amount of wire, coils, and power. So I'm going to be using the flat type of wire. Now that we've chosen our wire, there's just one more thing that we need, and that's the cotton wick. Now if you go to a website, again, you get a huge variety of different types, different prices. You can actually just use plain cotton wool from the chemist, cotton batten, cotton wool, whatever you want, cotton balls, whatever you want to use it. Just make sure that it actually is pure cotton and it's not something like polyester or something like that, you don't want to try smoking that. Now, with all these different types of cotton, I would recommend going with a proper cotton rather than just using cotton batten. It's very, very cheap. I mean, one of these packs will do hundreds of wicks, so it works out pretty darn cheap per wick. The difference between this cotton and something like cotton wool is that these are usually unbleached and organic cotton. Cotton usually gets sprayed with an awful lot of pesticides and chemicals, and then it gets bleached, which in chlorine, and you are going to get residue in there. If you do use your own sort of cotton wool, make sure you basically boil it first and then let it dry out. That should get rid of a fair bit of any chemicals that's on there. Or of course you can just buy a pack of organic cotton. The best stuff seems to be Japanese. I believe it's got longer threads, which makes it easier to work with. And surprisingly, Japan has got a really, really big fabric industry, so I guess they probably grow a lot of cotton. But anyway, I mean, you've got a huge range and at different prices. I'd just get something cheap that's organic cotton, preferably the Japanese stuff. So, okay, now I'm going to wind it around here. We want to keep the coils as close together as possible. 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. Okay. Now, tighten that up. Stuff is a bit springy. Could be worse. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You need that about here. Okay, and there's my coil. It's pretty hard to see. I'll see if I can get a photo. That's looking quite good. Let's put it up against something white. It's up against there. Okay, so this is what it looks like, and one suggestion: if you need to spread the coils out at all or push them closer together, put it back on the thing that you've wound it on. Trying to adjust it like this, you'll just crush it. Yeah, you need to put it back onto your form and do it. But as you can see, okay, I'm shifting it slightly with my fingers now. But as you can see, that's turned out quite nicely. They are not actually touching, it's just the way the light's going off of there. See if I can do it this way is better, yeah. And as you can see, those coils are not touching anywhere. So that's looking pretty good. And so now comes the fun part. I have to mount it. You've got your nice little screwdriver here. I'm going to undo this. Got some serious zoom action happening at the moment. I don't know how well it's going to show up or it'll be pixelated, but and ooh, come on, get it there. And there we go. Now I have to put the other one back in. Okay, let's give this a try on camera. Slide. That is looking good. So now I'm going to quickly test this with a test meter. It's always a very good idea to test it before you hook it up to your pod or mod or whatever the heck you've got. Check the coil resistance and see if it's in line with what you are expecting. You definitely don't want to get it too low. Remember, you're using lithium batteries, although these have got safety protection on them and hopefully shouldn't sort of like burst into flames in your hand. It's always kind of nice to check and make sure first. Let's put that down and get the meter and test it. Okay, I did have one issue when I was putting the coil in there, and that was that the this flat wire was too thin to fit under the screws. So what I had to do was double the wire over, and in order to make it thick enough to fit under. I think next time I'll just go with the straight wire when I've used this. So let's take a look at the resistance. And we've got 1.6 ohms, 1.7 ohms. Yeah, getting a little bit of variation there. So I'd say about 1.6, 1.7 ohms. It's a bit higher than I want, so I think I'm going to take a coil off of it. Okay, so I was kind of puzzled as to how the coil could come out with a much higher resistance than I expected, given the checking the calculations and everything else. Well, when I went back to the computer, I noticed that the reading 1.7 ohms was exactly what I'd expect to get if I'd used the next smaller, higher resistance wire. Now I have a roll here of, this is AW31. This is one size thinner and therefore with one lot higher resistance. This stuff is 33 ohms per meter versus 27 ohms per meter for the previous stuff, for the one that AW30. So I thought I'd measure it. Now this is supposed to be 0.4 by 0.1 millimeter. So let's have a quick check here. Let's get the meter down where you can see it. And as you can see, yes, that's 0.1. And if I measure the width of it, I've just bent it over so I can get a better reading on it. And that is 0.4, as you can see. So let's take a look at the AWG30, which I was actually used to make the wire, the coil. And that is 0.1. And let's check the width of it. This is supposed to be 0.5. And oh gee, it's 0.4. Okay, so basically this is the wrong damn wire on this spool. This is AWG31, the same as this, instead of being AWG30. So that puts my calculations out, and it means that basically I need to use 4 coils rather than 5 coils. So I'm a bit miffed about that. I've sent off an email to the company I bought it from, and they're pretty decent. So hopefully on my next order of vape juice, I will get a replacement coil of wire. So I'm going to redo this. I'm going to do 4 coils and use the same wire as before, but use 4 coils instead of 5, and that should put me down around 1.3 ohms. So let's do that now. Okay, so now I'm ready to install it. That is finally done. Let's see if we can see that properly here. Zoom in a little bit. Okay, let's get some paper under there so that you can see it. But, yes, there we go. Now let's take a look at the resistance. Now I've got this mounted. Let's see what we got here. And it takes a minute for it to count up. And 1.4 ohms, which is basically what I was after. 1.3, 1.4 ohms. So spot on. So basically the calculations and everything were correct. It was basically just a fault from the company that packaged the wrong wire on the spool. Yay. Okay, so now we're good to go. So let's put the cotton in. Okay, I've cut a piece of cotton off of the sheet and damped my fingers a little bit before I rolled the end, because otherwise if you don't get a bit of a point on it here, you're not going to get anywhere. So let's see if I can get this up here. We'll be best around here someplace. Okay. Okay, and get that through. get the tweezers out and swap hands here. Get the tweezers out and hopefully pull it through. And yes, there we go. Okay, fluff that up a bit. It'll dry out in a minute. It's got my saliva on it. Okay, so there we go. Now we need to trim it a bit. I don't think we're going to get it in the whole lot in there. So these are the perfect tool for doing this sort of thing. They're very, very sharp. They're dirt cheap. I paid about €2 for these. If you have a choice, get the carbon steel blades instead of the stainless steel blades. They keep a much sharper edge, and they're sharper to begin with. As you can see, these things are pretty much razor sharp. I might be able to get away with that. Let's give it a try. Yeah, that's going to go in there. I'm just worried about it's trailing around. Okay, let's give that a try. I've got some Halcyon Haze. This is one of my favorites. Venus in Vapes by Halcyon Haze. Really, really nice stuff. So I'm going to put a little bit in here. That's another thing. The original coil was really off to one side. At least with this, the wick is directly underneath the yeah, I'm just going to leave it here for a few minutes to soak in. It's about half full, I would say, the tank, and then we can give it a try. Okay, now the coil calculator program that I showed you earlier also gave us the correct power rating for this, the wattage. So before I put this in, because at the moment I've got it on a sub-ohm coil at 20 watts, so I'm going to unlock the wattage and drop that down to like 10, 11 watts. I'll try it off on 10. So let's take this out of here and give this a try. Now, pod attached. There we go. Let's see if I can get this up close enough to read. Okay, it's reading 1.339 ohms. Okay, so let's trigger it and see what happens. See if we can hear a hiss. That sounds pretty good. Let's give it a try. Perfect. Much, much smoother than the sub-ohm vape. I'm going to crank it up to 11 and then I'll lock it. Okay. Very nice. Very nice. And you can hear it was a nice even hiss. There wasn't any bubbling or popping, and there was no gurgling either. So all in all, great. Job done. So now I'm going to go and sit and enjoy this for a while. Well, now we're done, and thank you very much for watching this video. If you watched all the way through, I hope it was useful to you. If it was and you learned anything, please like it. Please possibly subscribe to my channel. Maybe check out some of my other videos, especially if you're interested in LED grow lighting. I do actually have a LED grow lighting company. I've been building and experimenting with LED grow lights for about 12, 14 years. I know quite a lot about it, so I've got some really good interesting videos that can teach you the basics, and also have a DIY how to make your own high quality LED grow light at minimal cost video as well, well, series of videos. So take a look at those. So until next one, happy vaping and happy growing. Okay, thanks a lot.